If you struggle to focus, it can feel deeply personal. You may notice that other people sit down and start tasks effortlessly, completing them without hesitation. Meanwhile, you find yourself frozen, staring at your screen, your desk, or your to-do list, unable to begin. This experience can quietly turn into self-blame. You may start telling yourself that you are lazy, careless, or somehow flawed. You may believe that if you were stronger, smarter, or more disciplined, focus would come naturally. But difficulty focusing is not a moral failure. It is not a lack of intelligence, and it is not proof that you do not care enough. In many cases, difficulty focusing is the result of a nervous system under pressure. Your brain and body are not failing. They are signaling that something about your current state is too much. Focus does not fade gradually under these conditions. It shuts down. When your mental and emotional systems are overloaded, no amount of willpower can reliably produce focus. This is an important distinction because it reframes the problem from being about personal failure to being about systemic overload. Focus is not a personality trait or a permanent characteristic. It is a temporary mental state, dependent on your energy levels, cognitive load, emotional safety, and stress regulation. When these systems are strained, your capacity to focus diminishes, regardless of motivation or intelligence. If this resonates with you, it is not because you are lazy or weak. It is because your brain is attempting to protect you from overwhelm, often in ways that may feel counterproductive. Your brain's primary job is not to optimize productivity. Its job is to keep you safe. When it detects uncertainty, pressure, or emotional risk, it shifts into a protective mode. In this state, your brain prioritizes minimizing discomfort and preventing failure over achieving goals or finishing tasks. One of the fastest ways it achieves this is through avoidance. This is why you may drift toward distraction, procrastinate, or feel mentally stuck. Your attention may wander to easier tasks or passive activities that do not carry risk. Your brain is responding precisely as it is designed to respond, even if it does not align with your external responsibilities. This is also why you can focus effortlessly on low-stakes, familiar, or immediately rewarding tasks while freezing when confronted with more important or complex ones. The challenge is not effort or interest, it is perceived threat. Your brain does not distinguish between emotional or cognitive overwhelm and actual danger. Both trigger protective responses. Many people describe this as the frustrating experience of knowing exactly what needs to be done but being unable to start. This gap between knowing and doing is not resistance or laziness. It is executive dysfunction. Executive functions are the mental processes that allow you to plan, organize, prioritize, initiate, and sustain tasks over time. When these systems are overloaded or dysregulated, effort feels heavy and impossible, and intention alone is not sufficient to produce action. Executive dysfunction often appears in people with ADHD, burnout, anxiety, or chronic stress exposure, but it is not limited to those conditions. It is a common response to overwhelming demands and internal pressures. It does not indicate weakness or incapacity, it indicates that your coordination system is strained. Telling yourself to try harder, push through, or focus more forcefully only increases pressure and reduces the likelihood of success. One of the most confusing aspects of executive dysfunction is that mental overload does not always feel like stress. You may not feel panicked, anxious, or visibly tense. Instead, you may feel flat, numb, restless, or mentally noisy. You may notice your thoughts racing, yet find it impossible to engage in meaningful work. This is because prolonged cognitive and emotional strain can lead to functional shutdown. You continue to function on the surface, but your executive systems are conserving energy, leaving little capacity for focus. Focus requires available mental bandwidth. If your attention is already divided between unresolved decisions, internal worries, emotional processing, and self-monitoring, there is no space left to engage fully with tasks. By the time you attempt to focus, you are already depleted. Motivation alone cannot overcome this depletion. Your brain does not have the resources to execute focus as a state of sustained attention. Another common misconception is that motivation creates focus. In reality, focus is dependent on psychological safety. When your brain perceives judgment, urgency, high expectations, or the risk of failure, it treats tasks as threats rather than opportunities. Threat narrows attention and decreases the ability to sustain focus. This is why pressure often makes attention worse, particularly for individuals with ADHD traits, burnout, or a history of chronic stress. Your brain is not refusing to cooperate. It is functioning exactly as it should in response to perceived risk. Traditional productivity advice assumes a regulated nervous system, stable energy, and minimal emotional interference. For people experiencing executive dysfunction, rigid schedules, time blocking, or aggressive goal setting often backfire, increasing resistance, shame, and frustration. Focus difficulties are also compounded by subtle grief over lost momentum, past capability, or unmet expectations, which occupies mental space and adds emotional weight to tasks. Your attention isn't broken, it's overcommit, split across too many demands. Rest alone doesn't restore focus, because cognitive and emotional load remain. True recovery comes from reducing these demands, creating mental margin, and allowing the brain space to engage sustainably. What does help is not trying harder, but changing the conditions around effort. Focus improves when tasks feel emotionally safer, expectations are softened, steps are broken down into smaller, achievable pieces, and urgency is reduced before structure is introduced. Focus improves when resistance is treated as information rather than failure. This is not about lowering standards or giving up on important work. It is about meeting your brain where it is, respecting its limitations, and creating conditions in which it can operate more effectively. The most important reframe to hold is this: your inability to focus is not a verdict about your character or intelligence. It is information. It signals that something about your current state, emotional, cognitive, or environmental, is overloading your executive system. When you stop arguing with the signal and start listening to it, your approach to tasks can begin to shift. Focus may not return instantly or dramatically, but with consistent attention to underlying conditions, it can return sustainably. A practical way to start is to change your question. Instead of asking, "Why can't I focus?" consider asking, "What is my brain trying to protect me from right now?" This question does not demand immediate answers. It creates space. It allows the brain to recognize that it is being acknowledged rather than judged. And in this space, focus slowly becomes possible. If this sounds familiar, it is important to know that you are not alone, and you are not failing. Many capable, intelligent, and high-functioning people struggle with these exact challenges. Understanding that these difficulties are rooted in neurological and emotional systems, rather than personal failings, removes a significant burden of blame. Removing that burden lowers the load your brain is carrying, which in turn makes the re-engagement of focus more achievable. The key is to approach yourself with curiosity, patience, and compassion. Small, deliberate shifts in environment, expectation, and emotional safety are often far more effective than forceful effort. This approach may feel counterintuitive at first, particularly if you have been conditioned to believe that pushing harder is the only path forward. But over time, creating conditions that support your executive systems is the most reliable path to consistent focus. If you want to continue exploring these ideas, you can do so without pressure. There is no urgent timeline. You do not need to fix everything immediately. Each small observation about your system, each experiment with reduced demand, and each moment of compassionate attention adds to your understanding and gradually expands your mental bandwidth. Over time, these cumulative adjustments create the conditions for focus to return. Before we close, it is worth emphasizing that recovery and improved focus are gradual. You are not expected to experience instant transformation. Real change comes from sustained, patient engagement with your own cognitive and emotional patterns. Listening to your system, rather than forcing it, is the cornerstone of sustainable focus. If this perspective resonates, consider subscribing to stay connected for more insights. Doing so lets you explore strategies that respect your brain, reduce pressure, and gradually expand your ability to focus. No hype or unrealistic promises, just calm, grounded guidance. Difficulty focusing is not a personal flaw, it is a signal, a form of information from your system. When you stop blaming yourself, ease unnecessary pressure, and create mental space, focus becomes possible, slowly, consistently, and sustainably. Your brain is not your enemy. Your nervous system is not your obstacle. By acknowledging the overload, respecting your limitations, and creating conditions of psychological safety, you are giving yourself the opportunity to operate at your capacity, rather than punishing yourself for not meeting impossible expectations. Focus is not about trying harder. It is about changing the environment, adjusting expectations, and listening to your system. It is about creating conditions in which your brain feels safe to engage, free from the constant weight of internal judgment or external pressure. Each small step in this direction is progress. Each compassionate adjustment builds resilience. And over time, these cumulative shifts create a state where focus naturally returns. If this resonates, consider subscribing. Subscribing provides calm, practical strategies that respect your experience and gently guide you towards sustainable focus. Difficulty focusing is not your fault, it's your system communicating limits. By listening, adjusting, and creating supportive conditions, focus becomes possible, step by step, without self-blame or pressure.